Good evening, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. This actually started about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And Dan Fields, Chair of Illustration, is going to do an introduction here. I would just like to say there is a ridiculous amount of talent in this room. It's really wonderful to see everybody. Thanks, everybody. Dan.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. In tonight's program, we will hear from many who knew him, who were influenced by him, learned from him, and loved and respected him. We will take the time to hear testimonies, both short and more elaborate, and we will close with comments from a member of his family. After which you're all most welcome to join us and mingle further and enjoy conversation with wine and cheese. To tell his story, Lawrence was born in Melbourne, Australia. Lawrence attended Art Centre on a full scholarship and graduated with a BFA in illustration in 1980. He was one of the very early and highly successful experimental illustrators to emerge under Department Chair Phil Hayes' tenure. He moved to New York City in 1984 and in 1988 had his first solo exhibition of paintings in New York City. Lawrence taught during several periods at the college from 1991 to 1995 and again from 2003 to 2005. He exhibited widely in Europe and the United States and is represented in the permanent collections of a great number of museums and public galleries, including the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, MoCA, and the Panza collections in Varese, Italy, and Modena, and many other public and private collections worldwide. He was a beloved family member, mentor, faculty member, friend, and an inspiration as deeply committed as an artist. We are here tonight to share in our mutual appreciation and admiration for Lawrence Carroll. Today, you will see, if you walked around Art Centre, a beautiful film featured on the digital screens that are placed throughout the college. On the screen, we see Lawrence, the consummate artist, and we see his words, and I quote, "Making art is about creating, making a place." May I welcome you again to this place and space that we have created tonight, a place where we can all join in honouring this man and his importance.
Lawrence Carroll is one of the rarest individuals I've ever known in my whole lifetime. That's actually true. I'd like to share some stories and events we experienced together. When we first met, an instructor from Moore Park College, a man named Frank Sardisco, referred Lawrence to me sometime around 1977. And Frank told him about my LACMA and art and technology background, and that I had taught classes at Art Center, Otis, and other places at the time, and that I had contact with artists at LACMA, especially during the art and technology years. And so on the first evening that I met him, he came into my classroom, and we ended up spending all the way into the night with the security people finally kicking us out. And on that first evening, we discussed aspects of Art Center and what an illustration career might be like, and we discussed how one might also enter the world of fine art, how that could happen. And I was able to advise him about Art Center College of Design, and I gave him some ideas about the illustration major at Art Center and maybe a potential career. But my knowledge at the time of fine arts was sketchy, although I had experienced direct contact with artists at LACMA and worked with some of them at Art and Technology in the early 70s. During the next several meetings, we created what would be a long-lasting friendship. We worked together on editing his work into a portfolio, especially to compete for a possible scholarship and entry to Art Center College of Design. And our efforts became successful together, and with a lot of work by Lawrence. While Lawrence was attending Art Center College of Design, he was becoming recognized for his skill and imaginative talents very early. And on occasion, he would make special trips in the evening out back to Moorpark College, and we would especially discuss his design elements classes along with craftsmanship advice and some design history, and we discussed ideas of handling of spatial design, thinking of image reading, and things like that. And at a later date, while at Art Center College of Design, he was asked by a few administrators about who had helped him or advised him before he entered there. And Lawrence mentioned me, and some had remembered me as a student and again as an instructor of design subjects in the past at Art Center. Eventually I received a phone call from Art Center and interviewed, and they immediately rehired me, so I was there again. I actually taught there in 1963 one time. That goes way back. There were still these biplanes in the air. Anyway, during the years 1977 and through about 1985, I saw the illustration department become one of the strongest majors at the Art Center College of Design. And it was certainly one of the best illustration departments in the whole history of Art Center, definitely by that time. And newly hired Phil Hayes as chairman, and instructors like Dwight Harmon, David McCarskey, Peter Lyoshkov, Richard Hertz from Academics and Fine Arts. He was the academic chair. Students like Lawrence Carroll, Matt Mahurin, Steve Rydell, Jeff Smith, Ju Chung, and many others were responsible for this success. I'm not trying to leave anybody out. Nearly everybody from those terms was like top drawer, and all of them are here tonight. I'm recognizing many of them. All stars, right? After Lawrence graduated, he and I decided to share a studio in downtown Los Angeles, Little Tokyo. Fortunately, we met and shared a studio with the great artist Lita Albuquerque, who had actually been a student of mine at Otis years ago. And we were able to see her working setup and things in the works by her, and talk a little bit with her once in a while. She was really busy at the time. It was the first real view for both of us into the work of the contemporary art world. All right? And Lawrence's first entry into the contemporary fine art world, in my opinion, was through his large expressive self-portrait figure drawings that he was actually doing in the LA studios that we had. And they were bold with charcoal and ink and very expressive. The drawings visually broke away dramatically from illustration styles and art school imagery. We had some unusual experiences at the Boyd Street studio. 2 films were being made there at the same time, Flashdance and Choose Me, a cult classic. Actually, they made that in our studio. And so we got free sushi. And, there was another incident. We also confronted and helped ward off a mugging. Lawrence was right out there in the rain with us, and there was also really good food in Little Tokyo, I have to say that. Sometimes we actually traded small prints and works and drawings for sushi at a little restaurant around the corner. I was able to do that for about 3 months, actually. Soon, Lawrence moved east and to New Jersey with his family. He also occupied a studio in the lower east side of New York City at first. No windows, but a great skylight. I remember he showed me, he was using wax at the time, starting to use it, and he told me stories about people that had misused it and actually had some really bad accidents, so it was a little risky working with that material. Anyway, we talked a lot about that, and I saw his studio, and he immersed himself in the whole New York experience. Later, at a later date, I was invited to an opening of the artist James Lee Byers at the Mary Boone Gallery in New York City. We had collaborated on projects together in the past, Byers and I, and we're pretty close friends. And so I stayed in New Jersey with Lawrence and his family. He and Lisa treated me like a family member. Byers invited Lawrence and I to a rare private performance in Central Park. We had to be there precisely at 12:34. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's Byers. near the Metropolitan Museum. Byers soon appeared in a red bowler hat, red suit, red shoes, red shirt, everything red. And he whispered thoughts to us from a short distance. Later, we had sushi lunch somewhere on the upper east side. While conversing with Byers, he pulled up his left sleeve and showed us a wound inflicted by Mary Boone. She had stabbed him with a pair of scissors the day before, so everything was red. And in Byers, he was an extreme eccentric, believe me. He was known to be very difficult to work with, constantly demanding changes in the gallery, but merry, and with exaggeration. And the same day, Lawrence and I also visited Steve Rydell, another fine artist. We saw some very good work. Sometime later, Lawrence, with his new work, caught the attention of the New York Stux Gallery. His entry into the world of contemporary art began to take off like a rocket. A quick look back, I remember Lawrence had begun distance running just after leaving Art Center College of Design, looking back. He became really good at it, actually, over a period of time. He used to enter 10K runs occasionally and would finish pretty high sometimes. While in New York City, he continued some of the running occasionally, early morning and odd hours. During the Lower East Side runs, he would notice images of discarded forms, cracks, lines, color combinations, old, overlooked, discarded fragments and forms. He had a great interest in humble, overlooked imagery and abstractions. We discussed this a lot when I was there. During his time in New York City, he met and created an important friendship with the artist Sean Scully. Through Sean, he met other individuals important to his development. Later, David Carrier. One of these individuals will play an important historical role. He also visited the various museums and gallery shows, which became a great visual library that he could constantly return to. Eventually, Lawrence moved to Europe, and when he arrived in Europe, he began to rearrange small hotel rooms he would stay in and place some of his work around to be able to feel more familiar in each place, to feel home with his work, and a little touch of studio to it. Eventually, as Lawrence's critical thinking talents continued to develop, his work began to show all over the globe. Great collectors, museums acquired his work. Lawrence had entered the contemporary art world and finally began entering art history. The last time I visited Lawrence, I was in Venice, Italy. I had a studio residency with the Emily Harvey Foundation for Avant-Garde Art. He was moving to a new place near Rome. He had left his Venice studio set up purposefully before moving, just to show his special work to Virginia and I. We had a great conversation with Lawrence and Lucy. I also visited where he had been teaching, and he introduced me to his class. Recently, David Carrier, the noted philosopher, scholar, author, and educator, published a book titled Aesthetic Theory, Abstract Art, and Lawrence Carroll. David Carrier authored a book as an author with a painter's eye. It's a terrific read and historically informed and very important for Lawrence. Also, contemporary painters should read this book. I want to thank family members with their own great lives being here, who importantly shared and were an important part of his life story. They came here from far places, Oregon, Italy, and many other places. Also for this event, I thank David Tillinghast and Field, chair of the illustration department, which is also a great illustration department right now. Lucy Jones Carroll, Kiko Doye, development director for the Art Center, and everybody attending. Thank you very much.
Because his work, I think, is very spare, but very generous. And I think that it has, there are radical objects, and yet they don't dismiss tradition. They're sort of, I mean, if you look at you know, he's always said that he was a painter, but he stretched what that really meant. They are the stuff of painting, that almost in literal terms, right? They feel as much like the substrate at times as they do the painting, and they speak to space, they occupy space, right? In a way. The paintings don't always, but then they also elicit space in the way that the painters elicit space. And I think those contradictions are sort of a great metaphor for the kind of person that I think he was, in that he seems to be someone who demonstrated to people the primacy and the importance of honoring one's own practice. And I think that was like a bracing thing for people to witness his integrity in that. And I think and we have a lot of faculty here, and as faculty, I think that's one of the things that I remember with the strongest teachers that I had, was just witnessing. Vince was one of those. Witnessing an artist being an artist, and I think the contradictions aren't, they speak to the corporal and the spiritual at the same time. And I think, these sort of are the bones and the skin of painting. And yet there's something more. They seem bigger than what we see in front of us, which is that uncanny thing that I think is very difficult to explain. And it's also kind of wondrous to see.
I think I represent in this the people that were students when we saw him as a student. We were the ones that were kind of right behind him as a student. This friend, Mark Penberthy, who is back east with his daughter, setting her up at college, really wanted to be here, so he sent this, and I'm going to read what he wrote, and then I'm going to just tell a little story. So, it's called The Path to Larry Carroll. My guess is nearly everyone here today has a story to tell about they knew Larry personally or how they first came across his work. If you will, please indulge me for a minute as I set the scene for Larry's entrance. I graduated from Tufts University in 1978 with a degree in art history and a great overall liberal arts education. However, I was drawn to creating more than I was drawn to studying about the people who created. After Tufts, I was working at a couple of newspapers in Boston doing some illustration, but I always knew that I needed to improve. I was curious about Illustrators Workshop, taught by Bernie Fuchs, Mark English, Robert Heindel, Fred Ottness, Alan Kober, and Bob Peake. My mother was a model for Bernie and Mark in the late 50s and the early 60s when they created beautiful illustrations during the heyday of auto industry advertising. They all remained friends, and given the connection, I called Bernie and he wholeheartedly encouraged me to attend the Illustrators Workshop. He believed it would be not only improve my work, but also be able to meet many other talented artists. Well, he was right. At the workshop, I met Jeff Smith, who recently graduated from Art Center with a degree in illustration. We became friends, and because of Jeff's encouragement, I flew out to Art Center to check it out. Well, I was pretty impressed. I showed my portfolio to illustration chair Phil Hayes, who guided me through the application process. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in a first-term graphic design class taught by Professor Vince Robbins. Vince's class was great because he had this knack of giving critiques and at the same time pumping you up as though you were going to be the starting quarterback in tomorrow's Rose Bowl game. On several occasions, Vince talked about this recent graduate named Larry Carroll. The way he spoke about Larry Carroll's work just didn't make you want to see it. Rather, you had to see it. Unbeknownst to us, the following week, Larry showed up to class. He brought in a portfolio of about 16 or so portraits that were astonishingly good. They were warm colors playing against cool colors, bright, vibrant colors dancing with neutral colors, beautifully messy, painterly textured areas, caressing refined and elegant rendered areas. The overall drawing and design elements were assured and sophisticated. I remember walking around the room, carefully looking at each painting resting on the crit wheel, when all of a sudden something went kaboom. And it was like in the movies when a bomb goes off and the film goes into slow motion and no sound. I was a concussed first-term foot soldier wandering around the room trying to make sense of these beautiful paintings. At one point, inevitably, the pace picked up, the sound came roaring back, and we were all thanking Larry for showing us his work. I think what really stuck with me was the fact that at the time, Larry wasn't a famous illustrator like the ones at the Illustrators Workshop. He was a recent grad of the school I had just enrolled in, and that made the entire arc of Art Center seem like a place where maybe, just maybe, I could tap into something that I wasn't sure existed and create some work that might, even for just a moment, stop someone in their tracks. I didn't see Larry or his work for the rest of my time at Art Center, but I certainly never forgot it, and without hesitation I can say that the sheer quality and level of those paintings inspired me all the way through 8th term. A month or so ago, my good friend Matt Mahurin sent me and David Shannon a text saying he heard that Larry had passed away. I was working in my studio, and when I read his text, I felt a kaboom again. Like that time in Vince's class, I was scrambling to make sense of it. This was different, however. And quickly, Matt, David, and I were texting back and forth that this was too early. How could this happen? Is it even true? I feel very fortunate to have crossed paths with Larry's work. His passing has brought back to a lot of memories, along with a reminder to remain inspired and create my best possible work each and every day. For that, I thank you. Larry, may you rest in peace, and knowing your work lives on.
But Larry's influence, it got me before I even came to Art Center. We entered in the student competition for, Society of Illustrators. Larry ends up winning the cover. Vince Robbins is the coach, and I'm some little kid in Minneapolis. So I get out to Art Center because I wanted to learn how to draw and paint. And they said, you got to get out to Art Center. So I had no idea who Larry was, but I heard of him. And I was lucky enough to meet him just once when he came to Vince's class. But, it's a spider web, and the spider web is felt in one place and it's touched on the other. So it's a positive thing that I didn't get much time with him, but I still got a feeling from that spider web. So, is this family here? I wanted to give this to them. In that competition, there were 3,000 entries. Larry was in there, and so was I. But that's my story about Larry.
We thank you so much for this recognition. Larry was a truly unique individual. I had the pleasure of being married to him and having these two beautiful redheads. I met Larry when he was a student at Moore Park College with this singular goal of going to Art Center College of Design. And with the guidance of Vincent and Frank Sardisco, he made that a reality. He managed to make something out of nothing, and we truly had nothing, and he was constantly able to do that. I think when he did graduate and he started to do some illustration, this probably is no surprise. Larry works best when he works alone and with complete freedom. And that didn't always happen. And I can remember one job in particular. It was for Shape magazine. And he was doing a woman diving into a pool or something. And he kept having to go back. The swimming suit wasn't the right color, the bathing cap, the ripples in the water, and the hair that he had, he just about pulled it out. It was really driving him crazy. The jobs that he loved gave him freedom were the editorial jobs for the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Village Voice, but they didn't pay much, but he loved them because they did give him freedom. And Larry liked to bend the rules a little, and most of the time it worked out. And I have one short story where it didn't work out, and then I'll leave you. He was doing, and we were living in New Jersey, and he was doing a job for the Village Voice, and they have tight timelines, so he had to deliver the job, and he double parked. And so he's going upstairs, just delivers the job, comes back down, and they're starting to tow his car. Larry also had a nasty habit of leaving his wallet in the car, but not only leaving it in the car, but on the dashboard, like for everyone to see. So the police would not let him open the car. They would not let him take the wallet. So Larry walked to Port Authority and begged for money. And he said it didn't take him very long. In about 30 minutes, he got the $2.50 or $3 to go across the Lincoln Tunnel, because there were no ATMs back in that day. He had to be at the bank in time to get the cash. And I think it was $150 for the impound fee, which paid more, that was more than the job that he had just had. So that was one of the times that it did not work out for Larry. But I'd say 80% of the time it did, when he would bend the rules. So really, in closing, he was a wonderful man, son, husband, father, brother, and grandfather. So again, on behalf of the Carroll family, thank you so much.